Imagine committing a horrific war crime and then having to spend 20 years fighting literal manifestations of your own guilt just to feel worthy of returning to your family.
I mean, that is an incredibly heavy premise.
It really is. Today, we're jumping into a highly analytical review of a film adaptation of the Odyssey. And it completely shatters that pristine white marble myth of the flawless Greek hero.
Oh, absolutely. It takes a whole legend and just turns it inside out.
Right. And this review actually praises the film to the absolute heights. It mentions that it recorded an astonishing rating of 10.8, which basically breaks traditional rating scales.
Yeah, that's practically unheard of.
But it doesn't earn that rating through, like, flashy action sequences. It earns it by treating its protagonist not as some godlike savior, but as a man who is suffering from severe combat PTSD.
Exactly.
Welcome to our deep dive. Our mission today is to dissect this acclaimed cinematic character study. We're going to explore the immense burden of leadership, the traumatic echoes of war, and that incredibly painful journey of returning to civilian life.
It's a journey a lot of people overlook when they think about these epic myths.
For sure. So you're going to hear an exploration that balances epic cinematic moments with some very profound and honestly uncomfortable truths about human nature.
It demands an immediate shift in perspective, To really understand the gravity of this film review, we have to strip away the 3,210-year-old legend.
Right, just push the myth aside.
Yeah, and look squarely at the psychology of the man at the center of it. The filmmakers are explicitly asking the audience to reevaluate the morality of violence.
Well, let's start right where that morality shatters. Because the film doesn't open with a heroic victory parade. It opens 20 years in the past, in Anatolia.
In ancient Troy.
Exactly. A place the review poignantly reminds us is now nothing but dust. So set the scene for us regarding the infamous Trojan Horse.
So the setup is just dripping with tragic irony. The Greeks have left this massive wooden horse outside the city walls.
And the Trojans, they fall for it completely.
They do. They mistakenly believe a plague has wiped out the Greek army and that this horse is like a sacred peace offering to the sun god.
Right, they think they've won.
Yeah, believing this decade-long war is finally over, they drag it inside their impenetrable walls. But of course the war isn't over, it's really just entering its darkest phase.
The belly of the beast.
Literally. Night falls, and Odysseus, Agamemnon, and the Greek soldiers emerge from the belly of the horse.
And what follows isn't really a battle. I mean, it's an absolute slaughter. The film depicts the Greeks wiping out everyone, men, women, children.
They even tear down the sacred temples.
Which is wild because historically the Trojan horse is lauded as this stroke of tactical brilliance. But how does this film contextualize that so-called cunning genius?
Okay, so it frames that genius as a moral failing. The film zeroes in on Odysseus's reaction to his own strategy.
He doesn't look like a conqueror.
Not at all. He doesn't look triumphant. He looks suffocated by shame. He's watching his brilliant plan result in the massacre of innocents. The director uses this historical event to anchor the myth in psychological realism. I mean, Odysseus didn't just win a war. He engineered an atrocity.
Okay, let's unpack this. Is the film essentially framing his 20-year journey home as a metaphor for modern combat PTSD? Like, the monsters he fights are just manifestations of his own guilt.
Yes, that guilt from that specific night becomes the invisible weight he carries for the next 2 decades. The literal monsters out on the water operate as manifestations of his internal rot.
So the physical journey becomes psychological.
Completely. When you survive an event where you inflicted that much pain, where you cross lines you can never uncross, the journey home isn't about physical geography anymore.
It's an emotional purgatory.
Exactly. He has to figure out if a man who did what he did even deserves to step foot inside his own home again.
And that paralysis of guilt leaves a massive vacuum back in Ithaca, which ripples out to affect his family. While he's lost at sea, his homeland is deteriorating.
It's falling apart without him.
Right. Queen Penelope is grieving, and she's essentially held hostage in her own home by these corrupt suitors who are trying to steal her power and wealth.
Yeah, it's a terrible situation for her.
But the film's treatment of his son, Telemachus, is what really caught my attention. His name actually translates to "he who fights from afar," which is bitterly ironic here.
It really is, considering the kingdom views the boy as weak. Telemachus is trapped in this impossible situation.
Surrounded by all those hypermasculine suitors.
Yeah, these predatory men who mock him relentlessly. And he's trying to figure out how to be a man in the shadow of a warlord father he never actually met.
The review even mentions he can't even hold a sword properly.
Right, which prompts the goddess Athena, disguised as a mentor figure, to intervene. But she doesn't tell Telemachus a story about Odysseus slaughtering enemies.
Or outsmarting generals or anything like that.
No, she shares this very specific, quiet memory from before the war. She reveals that before Odysseus left for Troy, he specifically asked to adopt and raise a small, helpless puppy.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
A puppy? Why include such a seemingly trivial detail in a gritty war film?
Oh, I love this part. It introduces the duality of man. It challenges the whole monolithic idea of the warrior king. By showing Telemachus this memory, Athena is trying to dismantle the toxic version of masculinity the suitors represent.
Oh, I see. She's redefining strength for him.
Exactly. She's showing the boy that true leadership and true power don't just come from aggression and violence, they require a capacity for profound gentleness.
That's fascinating.
The man capable of burning Troy to the ground is also the man capable of nurturing a vulnerable animal. It gives Telemachus permission to find his own strength outside of just, swinging a sword.
But that gentle capacity is exactly what Odysseus seems entirely disconnected from once he's out on the ocean. The film completely deconstructs the flawless leader trope.
It rips it apart.
We see him face these famous cinematic monsters, but the review emphasizes that these encounters are framed as moral failures. Take the Cyclops, Polyphemus, for example.
The Cyclops sequence is a masterclass in watching intellect clash with ego. They're trapped in the cave, and Odysseus realizes they can't simply kill the giant.
Because they need him to move the rock.
Right. They need his massive strength to roll the boulder away from the exit. So he devises this brilliant, brutal tactic. He blinds the Cyclops with a burning stick.
Which is just a pure survival mechanism.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Survival isn't enough for him. As they're escaping on their ships, this sudden burst of irrational ego takes over.
He just can't help himself.
He taunts the blinded monster from the water. He even shoots an arrow just to flex his dominance. And that direct act of hubris causes the Cyclops to retaliate wildly, which leads to two of his own men dying.
Yeah, that's a tough scene.
It wasn't the monster that killed those sailors.
Hmm?
It was their leader's pride. Think about a time your own pride made you speak out of turn. Now imagine that pride costing the lives of your two best friends.
It's devastating. That's the psychological burden he adds to his ledger. It forces the audience to analyze the source of the danger. Like how much of their suffering is environmental and how much is self-inflicted.
And the film continually points to the latter. We see this exact dynamic play out on the island of Aeolus, the wind god.
Oh yeah, that sequence is terrifying.
The crew encounters this boy-like being. And instead of showing the compassion the puppy-saving Odysseus might have shown, the crew mocks him. They're outright cruel to a vulnerable entity.
And the response to that cruelty is just terrifying. The boy cries, and that sound summons these giant, indestructible armored men who proceed to massacre a massive chunk of the Greek crew.
It's pure cause and effect.
Exactly. Their moral failure literally summons their destruction. They project cruelty into the world, and the world reflects it back at them in the form of unstoppable armored giants.
We see that reflection even more literally with Circe. The crew is transformed into pigs. It's a classic mythological beat, but the film digs into the mechanics of why it happens.
It's a direct punishment for their behavior.
Right. They storm her halls, eat greedily like starving animals, and look at her with unchecked lust. She simply makes their physical outsides match their internal rot.
And to save them, Odysseus relies on an intervention from the god Hermes, who provides him with a magic herb called moly.
Which has a very specific description in the source material, right?
It does. It's described as having a black root and a white flower.
The visual metaphor there is just staggering.
It's brilliant cinematic symbolism. The black root represents the dark, muddy trauma and moral decay that Odysseus and his men are entrenched in.
And the flower.
The white flower represents the purity and clarity of mind required to resist Circe's magic. He consumes it, forces her to restore his men, and saves them physically.
I have to challenge Odysseus' role in this, though. If he is the leader, doesn't he bear the ultimate responsibility for his men acting like animals in the first place?
That's a really valid point.
He's trying to hold together a band of deeply traumatized, desperate soldiers, and his inability to rein in their greed and lust leads to disaster. He isn't saving them so much as cleaning up a mess he allowed to happen.
Well, consider the psychological state of a leader who is just as broken as the men following him. He cannot effectively save them from their baser instincts because he hasn't forgiven his own.
A fractured man cannot build a solid foundation.
Precisely. His failure to lead forces his men into this animalistic state, and fixing that surface-level problem isn't enough. He realizes he's completely lost control of his crew and his own morality.
And that desperation drives him toward the underworld.
Yes, the most harrowing sequence of the film, seeking answers from the dead.
Following Circe's instructions, he sacrifices a bull and a sheep to gain entry to the underworld to consult the blind prophet, Tyrannus.
The descent into the underworld is where the psychological thriller aspect of this film review really shines. I mean, he's literally walking among the ghosts of his past.
He even encounters Achilles, right?
He does. A man he praises as the greatest warrior to ever live. But the glory of war means absolutely nothing down in the dark. Then he faces Agamemnon, his old commander from Troy.
And Agamemnon is simmering with bitterness. He warns Odysseus to never trust women, revealing that his own wife murdered him the very moment he returned home from the war.
Talk about a grim welcome home.
Yeah, so Odysseus is given this horrific, anxiety-inducing preview of what coming home might actually look like. But even that doesn't prepare him for the prophecy Tiresias delivers.
Tiresias delivers a crushing blow that just shifts the entire narrative. He informs Odysseus that the gods have decreed he will be the sole survivor of this journey.
His entire crew is already doomed.
Exactly.
Put yourself in his shoes. You are the commander of a ship, looking at your men, knowing they are essentially dead men walking. And you have to lead them anyway, knowing every decision you make is ultimately futile.
It's an unbearable weight.
This specific flavor of agonizing guilt is weaponized brilliantly in the film's reinvention of the sirens. Traditionally, we think of the sirens as beautiful, seductive women singing enchanting songs to lure sailors into crashing their ships against the rocks.
But this adaptation transforms their domain into the island of silent voices.
What's fascinating here is that it's a devastating creative choice. The voices the men hear wafting across the water are not seductive strangers.
No, they are the voices of their own dead loved ones.
Odysseus demands to be tied to the mast of the ship. And the sound that tortures him isn't a beautiful melody. It is the agonizing, unmistakable weeping of his dead mother, Anticlea.
That is survivor's guilt materialized into a physical obstacle. The film is using the sirens as a profound metaphor for trauma recovery.
It's the past actively trying to drag you down into the depths of despair.
Exactly. The metaphor implies that if you let the grief of those you've lost consume you, if you give in to the urge to join them, you'll crash your ship and destroy your own life.
You have to hear their pain, acknowledge the profound loss, tie yourself to your current reality, and sail past them anyway.
It's an ultimate test of psychological endurance.
It's a heartbreaking sequence. And despite surviving it, the doom Tiresias predicted finally catches up with them on the island of the sun god.
The sacred cattle.
Right. Odysseus explicitly extracts a promise from his men not to harm the sacred cattle. But a storm hits, starvation sets in, and the desperate crew breaks that promise. They kill a cow and pollute the sacred ground.
It's their final moral failure, and the consequence is absolute. Zeus intervenes, destroying the ship with a lightning bolt. Every single man drowns, except Odysseus.
He loses everything. That towering ego he possessed when he taunted the Cyclops, entirely shattered. The crew he spent years trying to protect is gone.
He's left with nothing.
He washes up on the shores of Ogygia, which the review notes is the island of Malta. And this is where the narrative plunges into the dark night of the soul.
He spends 7 years there, fed a blue lotus flower that erases his traumatic memories.
He's reduced to a hollowed-out shell, existing in a persistent fog. Why spend 7 years of screen time in a numb stasis?
Well, the blue lotus represents the seductive appeal of dissociation for someone suffering from severe PTSD. When the weight of your actions and the ghosts of your friends become too heavy to carry, the most tempting thing in the world is simply to forget.
Just to check out completely.
Right. The lotus numbs the pain, but it also pauses his humanity. He isn't living on Ogygia, he's just existing.
He has to wake up eventually, though.
To break free from that 7-year fog, he has to realize that numbing trauma isn't the same as surviving it. He has to consciously choose to accept the agony of his past in order to reclaim his identity and return to his family.
Which sets the stage for his long-awaited return to Ithaca. He's been gone for 20 years, but he doesn't announce his arrival in shining armor with a conquering army.
No, he returns disguised as a frail, destitute old beggar.
The review points out a fascinating detail, where Odysseus, still hidden in this beggar disguise, secretly intervenes in Sparta to save his son Telemachus from poisoned wine offered by corrupt priests.
He's already fathering and protecting his son from the shadows.
The disguise serves a dual purpose, right?
It does. Tactically, it allows him to assess the rot within his kingdom without painting a target on his back. Psychologically, it strips him of all status.
The warlord of Troy is gone.
Exactly. He is just a vulnerable man observing the chaos in his home. He arrives just as Queen Penelope has been pushed to her absolute limit by the suitors.
She sets an impossible challenge to buy herself some time.
Yes. She declares she'll marry the man who can string Odysseus's incredibly rigid bow and shoot a single arrow cleanly through 12 aligned windows.
And the suitors, these arrogant, greedy men who have been draining the kingdom and plotting to murder Telemachus, they step up one by one and they fail miserably.
They lack the core strength to even bend the wood.
Then the frail old beggar steps forward. The room erupts in laughter. But he takes the bow and he strings it with effortless grace.
And this is where the review highlights an incredible piece of auditory storytelling.
Oh, I love this part. When he plucks the taut string, it doesn't make a harsh snapping sound like a weapon of war. It sounds like a vina.
The vina is a classical stringed instrument native to India, renowned for its resonant, meditative hum. By replacing the sound of a weapon with the sound of a vina, the filmmakers are signaling a massive internal shift.
The instrument of war has been transformed into a tool of harmony.
It is the sound of order returning to chaos.
But that moment of beautiful harmony is immediately shattered by absolute, unrelenting violence. He turns that bow on the suitors and orchestrates a massive bloodbath, executing every single corrupt man in the room.
It's a brutal scene.
So what does this all mean? How do we reconcile this slaughter with a man who has supposedly just learned the devastating cost of violence over the last 20 years?
The context of the violence changes the morality of it. In Troy, he killed innocent women and children in a sacred temple to satisfy the ego of an empire.
That was an atrocity.
Right. In Ithaca, he is surrounded by armed, corrupt men who have infested his home, terrorized his wife, and actively plotted to assassinate his son. This isn't an act of warlord ego. It is an act of cauterization.
He has to burn out the rot to save the foundation of his home.
Precisely. It's a deeply uncomfortable climax because it forces the audience to ask if violence can ever be righteous or if it is merely a tragic necessity.
It's a gray area for sure.
But the key to understanding his growth is that he doesn't linger in the blood. He doesn't revel in the slaughter the way the old Odysseus might have. The film concludes by fulfilling a promise he made to Penelope 20 years prior.
Before the madness of Troy ever began,
Yeah.
he promised that when the war was over, they would take a peaceful, free walk with their little boy. And the final lingering shot of the film is them taking that exact walk. Except their little boy is now a grown man, and importantly, the legal ruler of Ithaca.
Odysseus doesn't violently reclaim the throne. He steps aside. He lets his son lead.
He has been entirely stripped of his pride, his army, and his youth. The man walking in that final frame isn't the cunning, arrogant tactician who breached the walls of Troy.
He's a weary, scarred survivor who finally grasps the immense value of peace. Relinquishing power to his son is his final act of redemption.
It's a staggering character arc. To distill what we've unpacked here today, this deep dive reveals a highly acclaimed cinematic review that takes a dusty, untouchable myth and grounds it in gritty, psychological reality.
It transforms the Odyssey into a poignant, often disturbing exploration of human frailty.
It highlights the devastating cost of war, the suffocating guilt of survival, and the incredibly difficult transition of trying to find peace when you've been shaped by violence.
It strips away the marble facade and reminds us that our legends are rooted in human flaw. They make catastrophic mistakes out of pride, they suffer the immense consequences, and they ultimately realize that true strength is found in endurance and empathy, not just in the capacity to destroy.
Which brings me back to the concept of the island of silent voices. I want you to reflect on that metaphor in your own life. We all carry past ghosts. We all have regrets, voices of people we've lost, or visions of ourselves we've left behind.
Everyone has an island of silent voices.
How do you handle those echoes? When you hear them weeping in the distance, do you let those memories pull you under the water into a lotus flower fog? Or do you find a way to acknowledge the pain, tie yourself to the mast of your current life, and sail past them toward home?
Surviving the ghosts of your own history is the ultimate test of human endurance.
It truly is. I want to leave you with one final lingering thought based on the themes of this film. We saw the sheer agony Odysseus endured over 20 years. He lost his entire crew. He was stripped of his royal title, his massive ego, and his youth.
Everything was taken from him.
But think about this alternative. If Odysseus had never left Troy, if he had just sailed straight home with his mighty army intact, flushed with the arrogant, unearned victory of that horrific massacre, would he have ever returned to Ithaca as a wise, peaceful king who willingly steps aside for his son?
Or would he return as just another monster looking for the next city to burn?
That is the tragic paradox of his journey. Sometimes you have to be broken to be remade. Until next time, keep diving deep.